We're back for your ears only. I'm Mark Garber.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news: an unstable psychiatric condition. That was Lieutenant General Mark Milley, commander at Fort Hood in Texas, on what records showed about specialist Ivan Lopez, who killed 3 people and wounded 16 others there before taking his own life. But that information apparently never got to the nearby gun shop where Lopez bought the .45 automatic pistol he used, the same shop that sold the murder weapon used to kill 13 at Fort Hood in 2009. New security measures for military installations announced 2 weeks ago have yet to take effect, and Milley said his base's population of 50,000 makes searching all of them daily unrealistic. Now this.
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Its purpose is to promote a more abiding commitment to freedom, a more constant pursuit of justice, and a deeper respect for human dignity.
It has been 50 years since President Lyndon Johnson signed the landmark Civil Rights Act that his political power and skill did so much to pass. The actual anniversary is July 2nd, but this week Johnson's presidential library, family, and friends will mark the episode with a 3-day civil rights summit in Austin, Texas. There's also a new Broadway play about LBJ, All the Way, starring Bryan Cranston of TV's Breaking Bad, and a new history of the bill by Todd Purdom, an idea whose time had come, which takes its title from a key speech about it by Republican Senate giant Everett McKinley Dirksen.
With the politics of our own era so stalled, even over other ideas whose time has come, such as immigration reform, at least according to most polls, it seems appropriate to consider the breakthrough on civil rights half a century ago. And to do that for your ears only, we're joined again by Robert Caro, 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner for The Power Broker, about New York master builder Robert Moses, and the Years of Lyndon Johnson series, currently book 4, The Passage of Power from Knopf. Welcome back to the program.
It's good to be back.
Now, on civil rights, you've written how his passion was shaped by early years. Remind us how deeply that affected Johnson.
His interest in civil rights started when he was 20 years old. He had to take a year off from college to earn enough money to go on. And during that year, he was a school teacher down in a little town near the Mexican border called Catula. He taught the Mexican-American children there. I wrote in my first book, no teacher had ever cared if these kids learned or not. Excuse me. This teacher cared. And he said later when he was president, I swore then, if I ever had the power to help these children, I would use it. Now I have the power and I mean to use it.
I covered Johnson as vice president and remember how big and intimidating he was just shaking my hand. There were also great photos of him getting into the faces of people he was trying to persuade. Were there opponents on civil rights whose positions were as ideological, nearly religious, as we see on the Tea Party right today? And what lessons from LBJ's approach to them?
Well, sure. The South controlled Congress, dominated Congress completely. They had the power. They'd had it for a quarter of a century, and they were as deeply opposed to civil rights as you can possibly imagine. Johnson had to use such a variety of legislative tactics and so much personal persuasion that you really say his passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was an act, of a talent that's beyond a talent and really justifies the word of genius, political genius.
Well, LBJ framed the bill as a tribute to slain President John Kennedy. How key do you think that was?
Well, that was, of course, important. When he makes his first speech to Congress after the assassination of Kennedy. So this initial wave of sympathy helps get the bill moving again.
The new Purdom book says LBJ showed restraint in some cases as well by not making his pressure for the bill too personal.
Johnson knew, because of his time in the Senate, how deeply the Senate resents presidential interference. He laid out the strategy for passing the bill in the Senate. He implemented a lot of the tactics for the bill in the Senate, but he was careful to do it mainly through the majority whip, Hubert Humphrey. And Johnson, really was a master strategist, but part of his strategy was that his hand would stay hidden.
According to some news reports, this week's Civil Rights Summit in Austin is also meant to shift the public's thinking about Johnson away from the Vietnam War that he seems stuck into escalating, even though recently released phone conversations indicate how it tortured him. How do you see the balance between his domestic achievements and that terrible war?
Well, like everything about Lyndon Johnson, there's a terrible conflict, such a contrast. One moment he's doing something wonderful, the next moment something terrible. Attempts to write the presidency of Lyndon Johnson and de-emphasize Vietnam, in my opinion, just aren't going to work. It was too important an episode in American history. Too many people, we talk now about forces in Iran and Afghanistan of 130,000 men or so. There were almost 600,000 men in Vietnam. The war went on for years. 58,000 Americans were killed. Over 350,000 had serious wounds. I don't think you can erase that from history.
Among LBJ's domestic achievements, of course, were the social and economic programs of the Great Society. But now some critics say they cost the nation more than they cut poverty, making big government itself a target for conservatives today. What's your view on that?
Well, as I said, there are two sides to Lyndon Johnson. I don't agree with that at all. I think that his achievements against poverty and against civil rights reshaped America. I wrote that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, freed black people. It was Lyndon Johnson who took their hand, led them into the voting booth, and made them part of American political life. His domestic record was as wonderful as Vietnam is controversial.
Well, you've said on this show and many other places, Johnson saying that about the Voting Rights Act later, that if African Americans got the vote, they could fight a wide range of other impediments themselves. How do you think he would react to the way state and local politics and now even the Supreme Court have reversed expansion of minority voting, limiting special hours, gerrymandering districts, weakening requirements for federal approval of voting law changes in those old bastions of discrimination?
Yeah, I think Lyndon Johnson, being Lyndon Johnson, would react in words that we couldn't print on this program. Because Lyndon Johnson understood power. He understood that by giving them the vote, he was giving them power. If he saw what the Supreme Court had done to the Voting Act, the Voting Rights Act that he passed in 1965, he would be reacting in a way to try to get legislation passed that would reverse the Supreme Court's the trend that the Supreme Court is part of.
Let me ask finally, as a scholar of power and politics personally, what do you make of the Supreme Court's latest undermining of campaign finance reforms last week, removing overall limits on how much the rich and already powerful can donate?
I think the overall impact of that is so negative. To allow this almost unfettered, unlimited use of money in politics is the most serious and damaging thing to the democratic principles of America that has happened.
Robert Caro is two-time Pulitzer Prize winner for The Power Broker about New York master builder Robert Moses, and the Years of Lyndon Johnson series, currently Book 4, The Passage of Power from Knopf.
Quote from the news, Armageddon has not arrived. That was President Obama touting 7.1 million sign-ups for the Affordable Care Act. Also last week, Democrats claimed to see advantages in the budget proposal released by House Republican leader Paul Ryan, with deep spending cuts in food stamps, education, and moving Medicare toward private insurance.
Next, Celebrating Chavez, the film and fight on immigration reform. For your ears only.